Very happy to introduce you to Dr. Stefan Lanka, who is a noted German molecular biologist and virologist. Dr. Lanka made some big ripples in the scientific world of virology in a landmark court case in Germany that resulted in proving that the measles virus has never been identified and isolated. This famous court case took place between 2014 and 2016, where the federal court in Germany agreed with Dr. Lanka that the measles virus has never been isolated or characterized. Dr. Lanka is also a virology historian and more recently has been teaching us the origins of the virus theory and also how it has been used to the advantage of certain elite groups in history. I first heard about Dr. Lanka from Dr. Hammer not long after they met each other more than 20 years ago. And of course, I've been following his work ever since. In 2010, Dr. Hammer officially went on the record and declared that healing takes place in the ectodermal tissues without microbes. And here he's specifically referring to viruses. Obviously, Dr. Hammer has been influenced by Dr. Lanka's research. Dr. Lanka, you must be very proud of your achievement in forcing the federal court in Germany to agree that a measles virus has never been isolated or characterized, but that also means that no virus has ever been isolated. But before we talk about the virus theory, I want to ask you about how you got involved in the new medicine, as it was still called at that time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think from a scientific point and also from a personal point of view, that was the most important thing what happened to me, to run into Dr. Gerd Hammer, to run into his body of knowledge, which was already there for a long time, but also for a long time I didn't realize the importance and the significance, but only then when I decided to work in the field of alternative cancer, right? Then I realized that the concepts of the alternative cancer researchers had not been alternative at all, you know. It was just vice versa, you know. Oh, we have something really bad, but we are going to fight soft, you know, with plant extracts and so on. But they are directly in the same theory, I mean, in the same ideology, right? And so
to destroy a cancer cell.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So and how it was concrete, it was I ran into a man. He asked me if I can help his mother. He realized that I have a good notion on virology, and he asked me if I could help his mother, because for 6 years she was taking chemotherapy. She refused to take it ever. After 2 years, the hair came back, but then the medical doctors convinced her again. So this was repeating itself for 3 times. And then he asked me if I could help. And I asked my colleagues from the alternative cancer, organization, and their advices, and of course the cost of treatment was so extreme and so extreme anti-scientific that I took her out of the clinic she was in, and rang Dr. Hammer. What could we do with her? He asked me, look, please fax me the diagnosis. I did too. He rang me back and he said me, look, it's 100% a wrong diagnosis.
Sure.
And I said, Mr. Hammer, 100%, it means it's really hard, this word, because she's taking chemotherapy for 6 years already. And I said, where can I check if this is true, what you are telling me? And he said, look, here and there, you check this kind of evidence and in this textbook here, and then you'll see it's not possible that she has a kind of cancer in this area, right? So, and I did. And then he asked me if I would accept an invitation of him, because he had a question on virology, because all microbes which were said are dangerous, he said they have a positive function in life and in healing processes. And so he thought that viruses do exist, and then they...
Well, he was a traditional medical doctor, wasn't he? So
yeah,
of course that was his training. But he was clever enough to ask the question once he started to understand. Yeah.
This was his real scientific behavior when he came across the notion, oh, there's somebody questioning the existence, the sheer existence of the viruses. And he checked the evidence and he said, look, this man has some solid argumentation and it's absolute logic. And then he asked me to deepen this and then to gap the bridge, because he thought that in a special tissue called ectoderm, ectoderm in German, the viruses would play a positive role in building up tissues again, So, and I helped him out and said, look, you are close to reality, because when bacteria are heated up in a high fever, so they transfer themselves into structures which of course bacteriologists are thinking that those are the viruses of bacteria called bacteriophages,
Mm-hmm.
because they thought they would eat up the bacteria. But
Right.
not like this. Bacteria are building mini spores, alias phages, when they have no time to build real spores, as we know already,
You
where
mean like in
bacteria,
an emergency?
that's it. It's
Yeah.
emergency
Uh-huh.
reaction and fever, or if you put bacterial culture under heat, under radiation, so they transform very quickly all their substance into much smaller particles, which I found one of them out of the sea, which are called now giant viruses
Mm-hmm.
or virioplankton, and you'll find them everywhere, you know. And in reality, those are building blocks of life. When life disintegrates, it goes much smaller and can rebuild itself step by step again. Not that quick like a real spore, like we know spores, and like I saw the spores in the marine algae I was working with as a young student. There I see the algae producing spores. You can see them in the light microscope, how they swim, how they settle down on another algae, big one, or on a stone, and then start to build up and grow again, you know. And in this case, I saw the algae was producing an amorphous mass, which I cannot dissolve in the light microscope. So I went into electron microscope and saw billions of those particles inside the host, inside the algae. And of course, afterwards, when I isolated them, I saw them also in the isolated form. And I thought, oh, I have a harmless virus because the algae was growing. It grew really good, and it grows today, and it grows on every coast on this planet, right? The same thing. And so I thought, oh, I have a stable host virus relationship, and finally we can study virology. This is how I ran in. I was fighting to get a lab, and in the end, in the 5th term, I got my own lab, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But in this time, I was believing in the concept of virology till an Austrian professor, which was not my professor, but I had the luck to use tools and apparatus in his lab because he was a specialist on nucleic acid. His name is Fritz Pohl. He was founding Europe's biggest sequencing company. And so he told me that something is definitely wrong with HIV and AIDS, and asked me to check this in the library. And so I came across that something it's not okay
Right.
over
Yeah.
there. And it took me half a year to accept what I was reading, because I said, oh, probably the medical doctors, they hide the protocols, how to isolate their virus. But in the end, then of course I understand very quickly that they had nothing to isolate, and they misunderstood something very deep. And so I came across step by step into this field, and at the end I was absolutely sure that the whole virology, as it was newborn in 54, that is completely in a dead end. And the old virology, which has been there till 52, abandoned themselves because they took out control experiment, and they said, excuse us, we saw the virus is a protein, a toxic protein, Latin virus, a
Yes.
toxin of disease. And we thought that the protein is able to replicate on our own. But we saw, as we let healthy organs as well into decay, at the end we come out with the same protein. So and all animal experiments never ever have proven an infection, right? So they gave up themselves. But of course, in public, this never reached the public.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
public, of course, the polio vaccination went on, and they continued. But they never experienced that there was a shift, a paradigm shift in virology, which happened in 54. And they were blinded by just a Nobel Prize, and thought, okay, when the Nobel laureate is asking, probably we have a virus, we don't know what it is. And then the new virology was born, orientating themselves on bacteriophages. They thought, well, if we have bacteria of if we have viruses of bacteria, well, probably the human or animal viruses look the same, but they never could isolate it, never see it even in a host. Never.
Well, what is the process that they're using today that they say they have actually isolated a virus?
Yeah, that's the logical question now
Yeah.
following. What isolation means, that you separate it from everything else, right? And this never ever happened. What they think, and what they think till June 54, that when cells, animal cells or human cells in the test tubes are dying, that they are transforming themselves into viruses, right?
Oh.
And this mass of dying cells, they call the isolate, because they believe we isolated something from the outside of the lab in our test tube, and we can freeze it. And if we use it, the whole, smashed cells, then they call it a live vaccine. And if they isolate certain proteins out of it, they call it, oh, this is a dead vaccine, because it's only part of a virus and the virus is not living. Anyway, and they never ever carried out a control experiment, so they could not see that they are starving those cells. They are killing those cells with cytotoxic antibiotica, and they are killing with proteins which are in decay. They always develop toxic gases in the end. Then they call it a live vaccine. And if they isolate certain proteins out of it, they call it, oh, this is a dead vaccine, because it's only part of a virus and the virus is not living. Anyway, and they never ever carried out a control experiment, so they could not see that they are starving those cells. They are killing those cells with cytotoxic antibiotica, and they are killing with proteins which are in decay. They always develop toxic gases in the end, nitrates, NO, which is a toxic gas. And these three factors together are killing the cells, and the dying of the cells in the test tube, it's equaled with the presence of the virus, that the virus is multiplicating, and that the virus is turning the animal or human matter into viruses, right? Like they saw it in bacteriophages.
So the entire process is wrong.
Yes, the full process, the whole process is wrong. They are fooling themselves, and they are fooling the public, of course.
Yeah. So the entire process is wrong.
Yes, the full process, the whole process is wrong. They are fooling themselves, and they are fooling the public, of course.